Welcome everyone to the Naked Founder podcast, the business podcast where nothing is hidden. This episode of the Naked Founder is sponsored by Teale, the home of money for women. Our guest today is Russell Teale, founder and CEO of Vivify, which helps schools hire out facilities outside the normal teaching hours. He founded the business in 2020 because he had a young family to support. Today, Vivify employs 500 people, has given more than 10 million back to schools, is set to grow turnover from 8 million to 12 million this year, and has raised £2 million in investment. It's a big welcome to Russell Teale.
Thanks, Chris.
Russell, we always start each episode of the Naked Founder podcast with the same question. What didn't they tell you about founding a business that you wish you'd known?
How hard it is. I think for me, it's been an absolute eye opener. You know, I've been employed by reasonably sized businesses before, done a quick start before, but to kind of be thrown into that founder, you know, where essentially you once had a personal life and a professional life, and the two now just are the same. So just that feeling of dread, happiness, loneliness, every single emotion you can ever imagine you're experiencing on a daily basis, but the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So unbelievable.
I think we were talking earlier, you've got two children and I've got two grown-up kids as well. And I think founding a business is much like being a parent. Whatever anyone tells you, nothing can prepare you for it.
It is exactly that. But like I say, you know, you have the most humbling of experiences every day. And weirdly, as you go through the stages of starting and scaling, the greatest of times were actually what often were the hardest of times as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I can relate to that. Russell, I'm going to take you back before you launched Vivify in 2020. So I'm going to take you to 2017. You just left Total Fitness. You'd been there for 10 years, had a very senior position. You'd risen up through the ranks to operations director. You left with a few pounds in your pocket and you co-founded a business called Fitter, described as the Uber-style health and fitness app. What lessons did that teach you?
To be honest, again, like the word I'll use is humbling. You know, back then, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, you know, this vigor to go and take over the world. I remember doing the projections, and you've got this mother of all hockey sticks. Within a year, we expected to be worldwide, and it was that sort of, you know, energy was unbelievable, and we had that passion for it. But we just got browbeaten. You know, we went to speak to investors. It was, well, what traction have you got? And this word traction became like a swear word to us. And to be honest, at that time, we were almost couldn't believe it. It's like, why don't you believe us? This is a phenomenal, you know, this is an opportunity. It's going to work. And I think it was a level of arrogance looking back now that, you know, just because it's my idea. And I still think genuinely that would work today. In fact, you know, some businesses are starting to do it themselves. So, but it was just a humbling experience of, you know, you've got to genuinely solve a problem, but whether you like it or not, get to work, get that traction to convince somebody to give you their money to scale it.
It's just when you played back those conversations in your mind, you can actually see now what they meant when those investors talk about, have you got a minimum viable product? Have you got traction? Can you demonstrate, you know, growth, et cetera, et cetera? And yet it's almost like an affront to you as this founder who's got this brilliant idea and you're going to change the world. And if you don't see that opportunity, I'll show somebody and I'll find somebody who will. There's almost an apprentice Dragon's Den type element of it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Here's the irony, right? So you set up Fitter, which is this health and fitness app. You left in 2019. Effectively, you run out of money. And you got this pressure of having no money. You've got a family to support. It started to really impact on your own health, didn't it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, it almost crept up on me. I didn't realise it. So we had my youngest daughter, my eldest daughter, and then my wife was pregnant with my youngest. And, you know, it's a bit like that weird psychology of you can see your money going down. You're not quite getting that traction. You know, you've done another investor meeting. And I was just sat in my living room at home. And what sounded like a knock at the door was this big thud in my chest, which at that time I thought, oh my God, and I couldn't breathe.
How old would you been then, Russell?
Probably like early 30s, something like that. So yeah, I just thought, I'm having a heart attack. You know, my wife was sort of like, what should I do? Couldn't breathe. Managed to sort of gain my composure. Went to the hospital, got scans. I wore a heart monitor for 2 weeks and went to see a specialist, and he just said, yeah, it's absolutely fine. It's like, if anything, it's in great condition, which is obviously a relief. But then it suddenly dawned on me that I thought I was invincible. You know, despite my mum suffering with mental health and whatnot, I never really thought of it as anything.
Was it a panic attack then?
It was literally a panic attack.
Never had one before?
Ever. But then that obviously led to 3, 4, 5 a day. And even still to this day now, I still suffer with them from time to time. So it was just a bit of a, right, okay. And it was literally my best friend, who was my best man, who said to me he'd also suffered. He just said, unfortunately, it never goes away now. And I'll be honest, at the time when he told me that, it really annoyed me.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh no, it will go away.
Yeah.
It'll just get better.
I'll make it go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that none of us are bulletproof. So how does a panic attack manifest itself? Is it always heart palpitations? How does it manifest itself in you?
Yeah, it pretty much is that. It's almost like all of a sudden you feel that surge of energy inside it. And yeah, what used to last days for me when I first started suffering with them, I can overcome in minutes now. And it's a weird thing. It's almost like, okay, I can see what it is. Let it come. And then just as quick as it comes, it passes. So yeah, I've had it, in board meetings in the past where actually I've had them and never said anything out loud, but it just happens. So thankfully now, yeah, it's one of those things that's a bit more controllable.
That's the thing with the Naked Founder podcast. There's a lot of people listening and watching this can relate to it, but they almost feel they can't talk about it because it's almost seen as a sign of weakness. And it goes back to that imposter syndrome element. I always think with founding a business and life in general, there's these sliding doors moments. You had one. You landed a job as head of operations at a company called School Letting Solutions. You were one of nearly 1,000 people who eventually made redundant at that company when it went into liquidation. Very bruising time in your career. So, you've left Total Fitness. You started a health and well-being fitness app, which is, which you've left as well. Then you get another job at School Letting Solutions. You get made redundant. You must start to think to yourself, is it me?
Well, yeah, I suppose, yeah. It's just one of those things. I don't know, and I've learned this a lot more as I've got older. It's done. You can't do anything about it. So I've always sort of had that mindset. There's absolutely no point looking backwards. But no, at that time, again, it was bruising. Yeah, it was a phenomenal idea, and it was a great business, and it was founded all on the right principles. But essentially, I've been brought in because of my experience at Total Fitness, where I was a established operator. I knew how to operate, delivering great best-in-class service. But fundamentally, you could see where some of the issues were. So for me at the time, it was a case of I learned a lot during that. So it's then what can I utilize now when it comes to Vivify to actually, do something that can be sustainable, which isn't relying on investment, and actually we can create something that can last hundreds of years. So that's what I learned from that business.
The hardest moments in my life, I've learned the most. Genuinely, I have. I look back and I think I wouldn't want to go through that again, but I'm glad I went through it because it makes you realise your own resilience, what you can cope with, and what you accept and what you don't accept. So in 2020, the age of 37, you were one of 3 co-founders of Vivify, which is the current business. What problem were you trying to fix back then?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, it's School Letting Solutions were trying to do something similar. You've got schools that are sat there empty evenings, weekends, and school holidays, and you'd have to be living in under a rock somewhere to not see that this is just becoming a phenomenal challenge for schools every single day now, with the reforms that have come through for the SEND education recently. They're just not getting enough funding, but they are sat on phenomenal assets, and it's 70% of what we do is sport, so it's giving access to communities to come and play sport. Sports halls, artificial grass pitches, dance, drama, theatre. But 30% of it is outside of that. It's the Women's Institute, it's cookery, it's sing-outs, choirs, church groups, language schools. So they've just got phenomenal facilities sat there, and you can take it right down into the micro. In Trafford, as an example, they've got fantastic grammar schools, but parents aren't able to get tuition. So you've got tuition businesses taking, what was Next on Altrincham High Street, putting desks in it to try and run tuition classes, when in reality schools have got thousands of classrooms which are just left dormant. And what we recognised was software was the real blocker, because ultimately trying to book a badminton court or a classroom, you have to phone the school, they're already stretched, they didn't get back to you. So for me, it was about creating this sustainable circular economy where if Vivify comes in, we open up that school, it generates income. We create 3 or 4 jobs in doing it for people to open and close the school facilities. Those people are obviously paid for by the money that the community spend in there. So what you end up with is this lovely circular economy that isn't relying on government funding or Sport England. So that's what really Vivify is about.
Where did the name Vivify come from?
I'd love to say it was, it just came to us, but it didn't. We looked at it and was thinking, what do we want to call it? And we looked at We worked with a really good agency who gave us a list of, I want to say, about 500 names.
Yeah.
And Vivify was one of the ones which actually my co-founder Elaine sort of picked out and was like, and its meaning is to breathe life into. And it just felt right. That's what we're trying to do. So that's where it came from.
I'm going to talk to you about something very personal to you and completely unconnected with work. But I think what it shows is how difficult it is sometimes to compartmentalize your home life and your work life. So, 2021. See, the business is just 12 months, 15 months old, and you're going through a lot of change within the business. And your mum, Janice, unfortunately takes ill. Single mum. She took 2 jobs when you were younger. I think she was your hero. She had a penchant for rehoming stray cats, I was told as well. Just tell us, because she died unfortunately. Just tell us about your mum and what happened and how that impacted on you as a startup founder.
Yeah, I mean, you've alluded to it. My mum was somebody that always put herself in front of others, and I know everyone says that, but I mean it. We would be
always put others in front of herself.
Did I say it the other way around?
Yeah.
She's so selfish.
She's so
exactly. So put others before herself. And I mean literally. We'd have £10 left. Someone would come, or my mum would speak to someone, and she'd lend it to them as an example, and then the electric would go off.
Yeah,
like that's who it was. So I think for me, she just instilled in me from a very, very young age what resilience really is. But obviously, I didn't know. Yeah. So for me now, as an adult and reflecting on it, that's what she taught me. But you're right. At the time, obviously, we'd just started Vivify. It was COVID. It's really hard to remember back to those times, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we were still remote working. Business wasn't off the ground yet. We'd started to build the team up because we've got a bit of traction. And at that time, nothing really can prepare you for that, can it? It literally took everything out of me. But you're leading a team of people. You're leading a business. You're trying to still scale a business from scratch during COVID. Yeah. So what else could I have done?
She died of blood cancer on New Year's Day, 2022. She's only 56 years of age as well. And it's you mentioned about the resilience that she taught you that lives on through you today as well. But how hard is it to compartmentalize that personal trauma at the same time as dealing with COVID, at the same time as starting a business, at the same time as having a wife and 2 young kids? How do you manage?
Yeah, to be honest, alcohol. No, I'm joking. Yeah. It's just you don't is the honest answer. You don't manage. But you just recognise, and that's what I said before. And I think, again, it comes down to maybe those almost subliminal messages and learnings that was taken from watching my mum growing up. I think it was a case of, well, what else? What else are you going to do? You could just sit at home.
What would your mum tell you to do?
Just get on and sort it. Like, what like I say, you don't sit there and lick your wounds, do you? You just get on with it. You just have to, get out of bed, solve problems, speak to people, and I think that's just what's been instilled in me, and that's what we did.
You, a lot of businesses start with a founder, co-founder, more than one co-founder. You had 3, and as often happens, 2 other co-founders left the business. You're the only founder left within the business as well. You bootstrapped the business until 2022 when you raised £1 million from Arete, Liverpool-based investor, which saw Bill Curry and former Tesco CEO Sir Leahy come on board as investors. 2 questions. What's your advice when it comes to choosing the right investor? And second question, what's it like dealing with the likes of doyens like Sir Leahy and Bill Curry, having them on board as a startup?
Yeah, I think in terms of choosing an investor, for me, what's been literally life-changing and pivotal is, and I think a lot of people say, but it is the people you're going to work with. I think that level of trust that you've got to have with them, but also that professional distance in the sense of you've got to expect that they're going to behave like an investor as well. And what I mean by that is that they're not giving it you out of charity. They're giving it you because, they see the potential in the business. So I think that level of, that relationship and rapport that you're going to have with them very early doors. And what's been phenomenal for me and for Vivify is in Arete and the William Curry Group, they're very normal people, very, very normal people that have come from working class backgrounds that get, what is really, really important in any business around work ethic, around, driving everything that you've possibly got, but also seeing you as a human being. I can't praise them enough for that. But then, like you say, Sir Leahy, thankfully or not, I don't deal a lot with Sir, as you can imagine, but it's a full circle moment for me in the sense of when I was 16, my first job was in Tesco, when he will have been the CEO.
Yeah.
So weirdly, having that out of body experience pitching to him, at the very start was a bit like that.
Yeah.
But great. It's like I say, genuinely can't thank them enough. I think a lot of people, you hear so many horror stories about investors, but we've been really lucky in the sense that they've both been so supportive of the business.
How ever tempted to go on Dragon's Den?
No, probably not. No, I think it's a phenomenal show, isn't it? And there's elements of it when you watch it. I still watch bits of it now, which is absolutely true in real life, but it's also not, isn't it?
Yeah, you see that. You go in there offering like 4% of your business for £100,000, despite the fact you've got zero traction, and then they say, "I'll offer you the £100,000 for 35% of your business." You think, don't do it. But that's what it's meant for. It's meant to, create those feelings. How different is the role of founder compared to the role of a CEO?
Yeah, very different. And it's hard because it's not, they're not completely exclusive of each other. So founding a business, like I said before, I think some of the greatest times I had was at the start. Selling to schools myself was brilliant. I loved it. I felt I got real energy and passion when I got my first yes from Orchardside School in Enfield. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, like I said, the highest of highs. Now as a CEO, it's not just me. I've got a senior team. You know Steph Potts really well. So I've got phenomenal people in the business, which is out of this world. But it's so hard to not let that passion overspill in that sense as a founder. And I think one of the hardest things I've found is people take everything you say literally. Yeah. So sometimes you might want to say something to evoke maybe a challenge or a different thought in somebody, but they literally take it. So, and that's been sort of the hardest thing for me. So it's understanding the impact that you can have, both in a positive and negative way.
I mean, you see a lot of founders step away from a business or step away from a CEO because their skill set was in founding a business, not necessarily in running it and growing it as well. You still feel you've got a bit of room to go as a CEO, but you can see that it's a different skill set required to do both jobs.
Yeah. And I think the time I spent at Total Fitness, I started there in my sort of early 20s and rose through the ranks, worked at pretty much every level. And, I operated a 40 going towards 50 million turnover business that generated 5-6 million of EBITDA. I think I learned a lot there. And so therefore, I think when you think about the jobs that I've done since starting Vivify, we're only probably 40% of the way through what I've kind of done already in a previous life. So it feels like, you're right, there's some way to go. But, I'm sure one day I'll be sat there and I'll think, hang on a minute, if Vivify gets to the levels we all think it can do, then maybe it will outgrow me one day.
How big do you think Vivify can get to?
I mean, listen, there's 27,000 schools in the UK, but the education system isn't exclusive to just the UK. It's the same all over the world. So if you think about the US as an example, we all know about college basketball and just the phenomenal facilities that exist in the US. So, and if you look at most governments across the world, they're not all able to invest phenomenal amounts of income into health and leisure infrastructures nor education. So, Vivify can solve those problems outside of the UK.
It's fundamentally a tech business, isn't it? It's underpinned by technology, which makes it scalable. So you've got 500 staff, you're set to hit 12 million turnover this year, and you've turned a profit last year, I think. What are your do's and don'ts for scaling a business?
Yeah, wow. Definitely don'ts are just lose sight of cash. I think that's the key thing, whether we like it or not. And again, that's back to the first question you asked me, what are the lessons they never teach you for founding a business, is just the sheer panic you've always got around making sure there's cash in the business.
How often do you look at your bank account?
Well, with Steph Potts now at CFO, not as often as it used to. But no, obviously back in the day it was almost like 3-4 times a day.
You mentioned Steph Potts. Obviously, I know her very well. She's a super talented person as well. And if she's listening, I'll deny having said that. But no, but she absolutely is. But that role of an FD in a business, watching the cash flow, it is business critical, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I've been really lucky. I think back to working at Total Fitness, I had Andy Mellor, who I co-founded Vivify with. So I'd worked with Andy a few times. I saw then what a commercial FD or CFO is like. So somebody that genuinely understands the business, the mechanics, the customer and how it works, and then how therefore translates into the cash at bank. And Steph is cut from that exact same cloth. So that is, I would say, for anyone that's at that stage of business where you're thinking about bringing on an FD, CFO, head of finance, having that commercial brain is so important to be able to connect the two.
Yeah, no, it brings me on to hiring. Have you got an approach to hiring? What's your experience of hiring? I mean, people talk about, hire slowly, fire quickly. I mean, what's your approach to hiring?
I think for me, we did a big exercise about values at Vivify and with the team, and one of the key words or two words that came across were passion and pride, given what we do, and the social purpose that sits behind it. But that's kind of what you're looking for in people anyway. Is for us, like I said, we're about getting people healthy, getting people spending time in their community with each other. So really, that's what I'm looking for, somebody that genuinely lights up when you see that. And I think I've done both. I've hired for skill set and not necessarily had that fire there, and it's not worked out. Whereas in reality, with that attitude, with that approach and that passion for the cause of what we're trying to do, with some experience, that for me is really, really key. And you can just see it. And that's been the biggest challenge in scaling a business.
You can train skill. You can't train attitude. And that's something that a lot of founders talk about. You were a Northern finalist in the 2025 EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards, as well as being a Business Cloud Northern Leader winner. And I know you said to me that it was the proudest moment of your life, even above having children. You might not have said those exact words, but that's what you meant. How important is your network, and how important is it to speak to other founders? Because it can be incredibly lonely being a founder.
Yeah, I think that is been the hardest thing. I left TF with no network. I'd put all of my life and soul into Total
Fitness. Yeah.
And so therefore, when I came out of it and I suddenly had to go and get a job or start a business, I didn't have anything. I sort of had little bits of it. And yeah, over the past 12, 24 months, I really genuinely have realised that and built such a strong network. And I didn't know or understand the real power of what that could be. Not only kind of professionally in terms of opening doors for Vivify, but just personally. I've been able to spend time with people who've been through things. And the EY program, as an example, was great. The Northern Leaders event, I was sat on a table of people, where you've got kind of chancellors of universities all the way through to people that started a business from scratch. And I think having that ability just to spend time with those has been, really important over the last two.
Do you have any mentors?
So my chair was my CEO at Total Fitness, Richard Millman. And so that's the relationship I've got with Richard. He was our first actual investor, by the way. He gave us his cold, hard cash on day one when we were all locked down and couldn't hug each other, as an example. So he's been that relationship I have with him every Tuesday without fail at 8:30. We have that call, and that's very much what that's about. So he's been really key to that. But outside of that, I've started to kind of get those people. Louise Stevenson is another one. There's people in the kind of Greater Manchester community that have almost become those soundboards, those people to speak to.
Yeah, and I think I think it's people who've got no skin in the game, and they're only telling you for the right reasons as well. Are there any founders you particularly admire?
There's loads. I think you get to meet them on these programs, and I think it's when we work really closely with Steve Parry as an example, who's the former Olympic bronze medalist. I'm sure he wants me to say that.
Yeah.
But no, I think going and seeing other people that have just got that same energy, enthusiasm, and passion. I think what I've also seen is the opposite of where you sort of, I don't know, it's very ego-led. It's about them. And I sat when I did Fitter and saw these people on the panel and thought, almost back to feeling that bit unfair. But now the people who I respect the most are people that have been through it and are genuinely trying to solve a problem. And I think if you do that, you do end up with a successful business. Yeah,
no, I think you work out very quickly if you want to spend any time with a person, especially as you get older as well. And there are some people who you don't want to spend any time with, and you work that out as well. The Naked Founder podcast always ends with the same question. And there's a tradition in the US where the outgoing president writes a letter to their successor. So if you were writing a letter of advice to yourself on day one of being a founder, what would you say to yourself? And this works really well for other people who are thinking about founding a business. What would your letter say?
For me, I think it would be go easy on yourself. I think I wouldn't listen to it, by the way, just so we're clear. Yeah. But it would be that. It would be don't be so bloody hard on yourself. I think that's it. I think, when you're at that point and you're frustrated, you're tired, you're upset, you've got the wins. I think it's that thing of just being a bit kinder to yourself, I think is really, really important because as we've talked about, there was times where I was at the lowest of lows and probably didn't cut myself enough slack at the time. So I think just that sort of just go easy on yourself.
No, absolutely. And I don't think there's generally anybody who I know in my network who's got a bad word to say about you as well. And I think that's why people are always happy to help. So massive thank you to Russell Teale, the founder and CEO of Vivify, great business. And thank you to our sponsors, Financial, the home of money for women. That's all for this episode of the Naked Founder podcast. If you've liked it, tell your friends and family and press that subscribe button. My name, as always, is Chris Maguire.